This topic of discussion, smart energy driving India's power sector, a very relevant topic in today's context. If when we are talking about transformation, then transformation, we are talking across all the sectors of the economy, including power. Power is one such sector which drives or which is an indicator of the development of any nation. More is the economic prosperity, more would be the consumption of power. How do we bring efficiencies? How do we enhance the productivity of this sector? How can technology play a role? And how we can have a sustainable development of the sector as a whole? On this topic, we'll be having an interactive discussion. This session will be conducted by MD and CEO of IntelliSmart, Anil Rawal. So I hand over the proceedings, deliberations to Anil Rawal ji.
Thanks a lot for the session, first of all, and pleasure to be here. And I really thank organizers to have me and have this session. So we are talking about smart energy in India and AI/ML. So this topic is about probably smart energy, but energy was always smart. Who has to be smarter is us. And we talk about energy transition. So what is to be transitioned is our approach towards energy. How do we understand energy and how do we treat it and how do we consume it and how do we transfer it? So that way it becomes a very relevant topic. So energy transition is being discussed a lot in all the arena, wherever you go. It has very wide connotations, lots of meaning, multiple interpretations, and at times you feel like four blind men trying and resolve the elephant's structure. So let's talk a bit about it. And before I invite other speakers, we all know global climate change. I'm sure by now only one good thing in last few years has happened, that people have agreed that there is really any climate change. The one man who didn't ever agree was the president of US earlier. Luckily he's no more. But otherwise the whole world now agrees that there is a climate change and there is the impact of temperature. So Paris Agreement, which I'm sure all of us know, which was entered into 2015, probably was the early agreement among nations to accept, agree, and work about it, that how to handle the climate change and rising temperature. And the target was to bring temperatures within 2 degrees of pre-industrial times by the end of this century. Now it sounds simple, but it is really not. Within 2 degrees, preferably 1.5 degree. And where do we stand? Current expectations really tell that it would be in the range of 3 to 4 degrees higher than the pre-industrial times. And that basically means quite serious matter. With whatever we have the current projections, about 570 cities across the globe are on the threat of submergence because of rising waters in the seas, because of glaciers melting. And incidentally, all of us are feeling the change around us, but not sure whether it's really global climate change or not, but we all are saying. So there are telltale signs, and out of those 570 cities which I said, 12 would be from India. Now it sounds a bit more serious. Submergence basically means complete submergence, change in the cropping patterns, serious unemployment, and other many serious issues. So that's what the topic was for Paris climate change. And in Glasgow, in November of 21, this was far more seriously deliberated and was agreed that all the nations would set the temperature control measures by controlling the emissions. So emissions of greenhouse gases. So India and China were probably the laggards, and they also agreed. And it finally got agreed that by 2070, we'll be net zero. What net zero means? Net zero basically means whatever you emit and you damage the environment, you absorb back at least equal quantity, so that you become net neutral as far as emissions are concerned. So how does all this story has with smart energy? Now let's try and link. To achieve this, what you need to do is biggest is probably reduce dependence on the fossil fuel, coal and other fossil fuels. What you need to increase is renewable energy, which we are doing extremely well as a nation, I must say. We must be proud of the fact. But far more is required. Our target is probably 225 gigawatt by 2022 and 450 gigawatt by 2030. So we have to reach there, and I am sure giant strides are being taken. Matter has really become far more serious now. The whole country is behind this mandate, and I am sure we together can achieve it. But whether just installing renewable power would handle the situation, just not. It will actually complicate. Having renewable is a solution to greenhouse emission, is a problem also, liability also. How? Because it impacts the grid significantly. When you infuse renewables into the grid, there is lots of variability. You know, solar could be very variable, winds could be very variable. Then how do you control? So control becomes a challenge, and that's the liability which gets created along with the renewable. That's where smartness is required. So when you infuse renewables, there is lots of grid variability, and when there is lots of grid variability, you have to handle the variation with respect to demand. So how do you do that? There are two ways of doing it. You handle the supply side, you handle the demand side, because there are only two sides of the story. Can you handle supply side? When I say supply side, I meant to say when your renewables are increasing, you reduce your thermal, you modulate your other production of the energy. Can you do it in India? Difficult. Why difficult? Because maneuvering power generation is not an easy job. Doing for thermal is rather very difficult. You can't put on and off the thermal power plants like that. It takes time. You can't shut them off quickly and start them. So what you can do fast is you can do same thing with gas easily. Few hours, on and off. But do you have the gas? Not. You can do very well with hydro. Few hours. But do you have the hydro? Very limited. Are you increasing? Not sure. You can do the same with storage. Batteries. You can store. But do you have the batteries? Not sure. When you will have, not very sure. Then what do you do? So don't try and depend too much on the supply side. Then depend on what? Demand side. At least you can control your demand. We do control the demand even now. How do we do it? Our discoms, when they don't have the power, what they do? They basically shut down the power, load shed, rotation. This mohalla, then this mohalla, then this mohalla, this hour to this hour. They don't have the power, they shut down. But that's not the way. That's really undemocratic way of doing it. Energy transition cannot be undemocratic. You cannot be shutting down my power at any point you want. There has to be some rights of the consumer also. So how do you do it in that case? You install smart meters. That's the big buzz thing now. So last mile consumption pattern understanding, last mile consumption control, last mile consumption empowerment of the consumer, efficiency, financial and operational efficiency in the hands of discoms is the key. You need two things, infrastructure and metering systems. That's why this new RDSS scheme is there, revamped distribution scheme, which is there. That's about making our grid smarter. What is a smart grid? A grid which responds to supply and demand instantaneously. Doesn't take much time. For responding, you need to have the information. Frankly, we don't have the information. How much is consumed in which area? How much power is coming when? That's why we do load shedding. We have the frequency issues. We have unstable grid. We keep struggling with the grid. That's where smartness is required. And that's where smart energy becomes relevant. And from here, we drive AI/ML. When you do smart energy, it throws humongous amount of data. I can comfortably say to you guys that biggest transformational program of the country, for sure, post our independence is now on. It is bit silent, bit subtle, gradual, but very steady. We have done very well on generation. We have done very well on transmission. We have really not done well on distribution because despite many, many efforts. Biggest transformational program is going to touch each Indian now because it is working on the last mile. It's working on you, me, and everybody. it's working on our homes. That's what the smart energy is. That's what the energy transition is. Transitioning from fossil fuel to democratic, decarbonized, decentralized energy is energy transition. That's why this topic is very, very critical. I'm sure it's post-lunch and not easy to hear such heavy things, but still we'll try and do our best in keeping you alive.